Good afternoon. It's November 18th, 2024. It's been a couple weeks since the election, and I wish I could say I was still enthusiastic, but Trump's already been making some controversial picks, and it's not looking good, in my opinion. A lot of neocons are being brought into the fold. It's very similar to the first time Trump won. And he addressed that on the Joe Rogan podcast. He talked about how, he got in, wasn't very familiar with a lot of people, and made some bad picks, specifically mentioned John Bolton. So you could maybe say, okay, well, first time political novice, Trump gets in, not familiar with a lot of the insiders in Washington. But he doesn't have that excuse now. He did an entire term as the United States president, and he's had time to prepare. He said, he was being very thoughtful about the people that he was selecting to be brought into his administration. And Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik, Pete Hegseth, all these people, Mike Waltz. As far as I'm concerned, these are not good picks, especially when it comes to foreign policy and military policy. It's not good. Today, I'd like to focus on Trump's pick for the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. And initially, I didn't know who Pete Hegseth was not very familiar with him. I don't watch a lot of cable news, so apparently he's a Fox News commentator. So I'm sure for the people that watch Fox News, they're probably familiar with the guy. But I initially thought, oh, good. This is a guy that might be an outsider, not somebody that's coming from within the military-industrial complex. And I haven't found anything that directly ties him to the military-industrial complex. But he is a rabid supporter for Israel. He's a big neocon, very supportive of intervention. And I was trying to find articles kind of, criticizing him, try to find that why would this not be a good pick? And a lot of the initial things that I was finding were articles about his lack of support and criticism of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies for the military. And I was like, well, I agree with that. The objective of the military should be to act as efficiently as possible and promote and harness the best people, regardless of their color, regardless of their gender, any of that stuff. It should just be the best people, and we're going to do whatever needs to be done. It's not about being nice. It's not about people's feelings. If your feelings get hurt, you can deal with that. That's on you. Their goal is to accomplish the task set forth for the mission. You know what I mean? You accomplish the mission. That's the only priority. We don't care about anything else. And that's the same thing for, I saw he was getting a lot of criticism for not supporting women in infantry roles. And I agree. We don't need men and women living side by side. If you got an infantry unit and they're out living in a fob, the last thing that you want to deal with if you're a squad leader or a platoon leader, any of that is, oh great, now we got people hooking up. It's just adding layers of drama, layers of complexity to an already terrible situation that you're going to be in. So that's the last thing you want to deal with. It's not saying that women can't do the job. It's just saying it's going to make the mission harder to accomplish. And again, that's the only thing the military needs to be concerned with. So when I see the mainstream media attacking him for that, I'm thinking, not a big deal. I can get behind that. And then I saw some other stuff talking about he was wanting to give support for people that have been convicted of war crimes, war criminals. And again, this is something that I don't have a problem with. If you all are going to make the decision to send our men and women off to combat, bad things are going to happen. We don't need to be out on these occupying missions. Once you decide to let the dogs off the leash, you're going to let them go do what they need to do. And that means horrible things are going to happen, which is why war should always be the last resort. We should never just be freely using our military force to deploy and influence governments. Like when we make the decision to deploy our troops, it's going to be bad. And that's how it should be, because that will deter nations, and that will deter terrorists from doing anything in the first place. That's your deterrent, is that when we do decide to send out our troops, we're going to come in and we're going to tear stuff up, and you're going to regret whatever it is you did that brought us to this point to send our military in. So, I'm not trying to justify. There's a lot of things that go down during combat and war crimes of the past that I don't support. I'm not saying that they're right. But I'm saying before you're willing to put those people on trial, try to think what you would do in those situations. It's real easy to look at a lot of them and say you would never do that. But until you're actually there, until you're on your third or fourth deployment, until you've just watched, one of your best friends get blown up, until you've been dealing with the stress every day of being deployed, being engaged in firefights and everything else that our military goes through, and until you've been there and done it, how about you hold back the criticism? So when I see people criticizing him for his support for war criminals, again, I can't really get behind that. So Pete Hegseth, he's a major in the Army National Guard. Apparently he was in the National Guard in Minnesota. I wonder if he knew Tim Waltz. No, unlike Tim Waltz, this guy actually served. And I can give respect to him. He deployed. He went on combat tours. One of the things that jumped out about me was I saw that while he was deployed in Iraq, at one point he was working within civil military operations, civil affairs. That's kind of the whole winning hearts and minds strategies. And basically it's almost like, how do we put a good face on what our military is doing while we're occupying your country? It's that winning the hearts and minds and really selling our narrative and pushing propaganda into these countries to try to help with the mission. So I get that, but it just makes me, to me, it throws up red flags. I'm like, okay, so you've been trained in basically how to sell a narrative and how to push an agenda. Then you come back, you're on Fox News, definitely an organization that pushes an agenda, and Fox News isn't the only one. I can't stand any of the really mainstream or cable news, ABC, MSNBC, Fox News, CNN. They're all pretty trash. Every now and then you'll have one person on there that's actually trying to speak some truth, speak some facts, and they get shouted down by the 3 or 4 other people on the panel, and it's all just political theater. I would advise everybody to read their news either online from alternate websites or alternate publications, read books, inform yourself that way. Try to eliminate as much of the spin as possible. Not that just reading it will eliminate the spin, but I think it helps you kind of decipher through it, and you don't have to just listen to somebody who's able to constantly put a twist or spin on what it is you're hearing. So, like I said, everything I've looked into this guy, to me the biggest threat is all of his support for military intervention into other countries, and especially Israel. Because what I've been saying forever is, if Trump gets in, I'm concerned that we're going to see a lot of our efforts that have been going to support the Ukraine and Russia, which we shouldn't be doing. But I'm worried that all we're going to see is maybe a drawdown in support for the Ukraine and more of those efforts directed to Israel and the Middle East. How about none of them? Let's stop supporting Ukraine. Let's stop supporting Israel. Let's stop all of it. Bring all of our troops home. Stop giving all this money out. And all the Republicans that have been critical of what's been going on with Ukraine and Russia, I can guarantee it, as soon as you start seeing more support going in for Israel and potentially attacking Iran and expanding what's been going on between Israel and Palestine, you're going to see all the Republicans support that, because that's just the way it goes historically. And I know them. I know a lot of Republicans that are saying, well, that's different. We do need to support them. And, they still push this terrorist narrative. And don't get me wrong, radical Islam is definitely a threat. I'm not saying that it's not. But never-ending war is a very serious threat to us, just as a nation. It's not feasible to be in these never-ending wars. We need to have a legitimate Department of Defense. We need to protect our borders. We need to have common sense policies that take care of America. We need to get out of NATO. We need to get out of the UN. And we need to take care of America. And this guy, Pete Hegseth, I think he sees America and Israel connected at the hip. I think he might think he lives in the United States of Israel. Like he talked about, well, here, actually, let me just show you this clip that I got from the Middle East Eye, and it's on their YouTube channel. And just listen, this is how this guy wants to promote policy. This guy's going to potentially be the Secretary of Defense. Okay? So think about that.
Open up your Bible. Open up your Bible. God granted Abraham this land. The 12 tribes of Israel established the constitutional monarchy 1000 BC. King David was their second king and established Jerusalem as the capital. Jews were fighting foreign occupiers for centuries, ultimately maintaining a presence there. But the key aspect, and right now, Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims are trying to erase the Jewish ties to Jerusalem as we speak. I've been there multiple times. They're trying to make it look like Jews were never there. The most important aspect of this is the international community granted sovereignty to the Jews, to the Jewish state after World War II, and Israel has had to fight defensive war after defensive war, with every country coming to crush it ever since then, just to exist. Ainsley?
So there you see. He's pretty all in on Israel. And it's funny because he talks about how, since the end of World War II, the international community, and he's talking about the United Nations. That's like one of the first things the United Nations did when they were established, was recognize the state of Israel. And of course, this was an ongoing issue. Like you would think, well, that's a weird decision for the United Nations to rule on immediately. Well, it's because it had been going on for approximately 30 years, since about the beginning of World War I. And during that clip, you hear Hegseth talking about, well, the Jews have been there forever fighting for their position in Israel. That's not accurate. Now, yes, historically, you go back a couple thousand years, they were there, but the Jews were not there prior to World War I. There might have been a small group of them, but it was predominantly occupied by Palestinians and Muslims. The Jewish population was moving in prior to World War I, and that was all part of the Zionist movement. It was Jews that were fleeing oppression in Russia and Eastern Europe and other parts of the world, because they were being oppressed and they were being attacked violently. They used to have these pogroms and they would attack the Jews. So the Zionist movement was about going back to Israel and creating their own state. So this narrative that like everybody pushes is not accurate. Everybody, you hear that all the time. Oh, that's been going on that's not true. That's not true. And another quote that I found by Pete Hegseth is about democracy, and it's a quote that I agree with. He says, "Do you know what the founders did not want us to be? A democracy." And he's 100% right. Democracy is not. We're a republic. We're a constitutional republic based on democratic principles, as far as giving us the ability to vote, to elect the representatives in our republic that get to make the decisions. But we're not a democracy. But you know what else we aren't? We're not a theocracy. Okay? The rule of law is the Constitution. So it's not the Bible. It's your right to believe that. If you want to believe everything that the Bible says, and you want to personally believe that that's what you would do for initiating and drafting your policy is based on the Bible, well, that's your personal thought. But to the fact that you're potentially going to be the Secretary of Defense, and you're talking about the things that it says in the Bible about why, and you believe that's why we should be supporting Israel, that's not good. That's radical. And this is who Trump is bringing in. So just because the guys on your team are in office, don't start sacrificing the principles and the foundations of our country. It's real easy to do. Both sides do it. Democrats do it. Now that Trump's in, you're going to start seeing Republicans do it. Don't do it. We have an obligation, we have a duty as United States citizens to make sure that our representatives are held accountable and are bound by the Constitution. So let's make sure that that happens, and don't just start letting things slide because you see it as your team is in office. Remember, it's about putting America first, and that's exactly what we need to do. Another thing Pete Hegseth has done is openly state that he supports launching attacks into Iran. He wants to bomb Iran's infrastructure, and he sees Iran as a terrible threat to the U.S. And he has stated his support for Trump's decision during his first term to assassinate the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani, which was honestly one of the only things from Trump's foreign policy that I was extremely critical of. I thought he had done a good job of kind of tempering our intervention in other countries, and I didn't see the need for Trump to assassinate this guy. It seemed like, like a very aggressive act against a foreign country, and we should be using diplomatic means, not just assassinating people. And supposedly the speculative theory is that Soleimani was going to Iraq because they were negotiating a cooperation deal with Saudi Arabia through Iraq, kind of acting as a mediator, because it's a very complex situation over there. Iran's predominantly Shiite, Saudis are Sunnis, and the Shiites and the Sunnis are fighting each other. And, so that's a whole nother layer of complexity to the Middle East situation. And, that's actually one of the things that they said bin Laden's goal was to unite the Shiites and the Sunnis, basically create like one organized, coordinated Islamic attack to destroy the Western world. And again, I'm not trying to downplay the threat of radical Islam. It's 100% an actual threat. But how much of that actually is direct threat to us without us leaving our borders unsecure and without us, allowing those things to happen here? Our best effort should be diplomatic efforts with these countries and with these organizations, not assassinating people. That didn't all of a sudden make a lot of radicalized Islamists say, hey, you know what? Let's not be radical Islamists anymore. They assassinated this Iranian general, so we should probably tone it down a little bit. That's not how I think it works. So And we've seen recently in mainstream media, they've really been amping up these claims that the FBI is disrupting Iranian assassination attempts against President Trump. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. You know, we really need to stay vigilant. I could see some type of another attack happening to justify further intervention or further assistance to Israel. And I mean, that could be something here. You know, hopefully it doesn't happen. But just remember, stay vigilant. Don't buy into all the propaganda. And we gotta hold all these people accountable, especially President-elect Donald Trump, because a lot of people voted for him because of the promises he made. So make sure he gets held accountable. He doesn't get a pass. So that's all I got today. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.